Hello and welcome to a fun little summary wrap up. Hopefully the birds aren't too obnoxious, but I have quite the book wrap up to do. So in April, I ended up reading 16 books, which is an insane amount. Truly, it's incredible how many books you can read when you're putting off all responsibilities. So if you didn't know, I moved the end of April. So all of April, I was supposed to be slowly packing and getting ready for the move, and instead I read 16 books. So that is what I'm here to discuss. Starting with maybe not the best book to start with, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is my most recent book that I finished, and I ended up rating it a 2 stars just because I despised the writing style. This was the April Patreon book for my book club, and therefore I had to finish it. If I didn't have to finish it, I would have definitely DNF'd this book. The writing is very classical in a way, so it feels like you're reading a classic, but you don't get the bragging rights of saying that you're reading a classic. It was very, very pretentious in its style almost. It's also very interesting because this is told through journal entries, and so you're literally being told everything, and I feel like there should have been a better way to handle that, and instead you're left with 320 pages of being told through these journal entries, yet nothing actiony happens until 250 pages in. And so I was just so bored with this book. I haven't been bored with a book in a very long while, it feels like. This book, though, just bored me unlike any other. I did not want to finish this book. I spent a week and a half trying to finish it, and I just could not bring myself to do it. So it did get a 2 star from me. I really want the wind to stop blowing. I really wish that there was more happening in this book, or the writing style was different. The premise seems cute. Emily's out here, creating an encyclopedia about fairies. That seems like such a cute, fun concept that I would really vibe with. But I didn't. So it did get a 2 star from me. I will not be continuing the series, unfortunately. So, well, not unfortunately, I just didn't enjoy it enough to continue it. So luckily I didn't purchase this. I did borrow it from the library, so that's a win for me. If I didn't spend my money and didn't enjoy a book, it's all good. Next, I picked up Six of Crows. This was for the Wyverns and Words Book Club book for April. And this was a reread. I believe this was my 4th reread, and I really did enjoy it. I will say it was a little bit more boring than my previous rereads, simply because I think either I'm used to the show's action, perhaps, or I just finally got to a point where I kind of remembered what was going on, and therefore I was just a little bored. I did forget some really, really good lines from Jesper, so that was so fun to experience again, because Jesper, need I say more? There's a lot of dialogue in this book, and I'm someone who really does enjoy a lot of dialogue, especially fun dialogue like the one Jesper was providing us with. And the bangs have got to go. The bangs need to go behind my ear. I cannot stand this wind blowing in my face any longer. I thought filming outside was a good idea, but in practice it's driving me insane. I loved how each character really felt like their own character. It was very, very fleshed out. Each character didn't feel like a copy and paste from each other. They all had their own histories and backstories. And Leigh Bardugo was really good about intermixing character backstories in a way that wasn't too info dumpy. Because typically when we get backstories, it's always italicized text, it's 12 pages too long, and I get bored before we even properly get into it. But with Leigh Bardugo's writing, you get to learn more about the characters in a way that's not boring and adds value to the story, and it's in snippets, so you get the full picture throughout the book. After I picked up Six of Crows, I did pick up Crooked Kingdom, and this is actually the book where I was the most bored. They're hiding out in a tomb cemetery type moment, and most of that action I was just bored because I knew a big action sequence was up and coming, and I just wanted to get to that point, but instead we spent a chunk of our time just stuffed away in a stuffy little tomb. I did appreciate the ending of this book. I think I can understand why people don't like what happens, but I think Leigh Bardugo's motivation for a certain scenario happening makes sense in the long run. It makes sense for the rest of the group dynamics development. And I did enjoy rereading this book simply because I didn't remember a lot of the other characters' endings, particularly Inej's. Yeah, I did really enjoy the reread. I rated both Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom 5 stars. I don't typically change my ratings for rereads unless I had a massive change in opinion, which I really didn't. I enjoyed them, I was a little bored, and I can understand why people might be confused when they start the Grishaverse starting with Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. So I definitely do still recommend to pick up Shadow and Bone before picking up Six of Crows, or even watching the TV show. Like, now that you have that option, there is a lot of information to take in when you first start these books, especially with the world building, with all the Grisha and the different levels of Grisha and all of their powers. And then on top of that, you have this massive world with Ravka and Shuhan and the Fold, and trying to understand the geography and what places hate the Grisha, what places worship the Grisha, and that sort of dynamic, on top of there being so many characters in this book. So I understand why people can be a little overwhelmed when starting with the Six of Crows duology. So if you want to get into the Grishaverse, I definitely recommend picking up Shadow and Bone. And if you don't really enjoy it, I promise you, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom are definitely better than Shadow and Bone. So it's weird recommending a book series that I don't enjoy as much as I do with this one, but I think for context, I think it's important to gain some sort of familiarity with the world before diving into this, because it doesn't give you a lot of explanation. It just throws the information out there as if you understand it, which when I first read it, I did not, and I just kept reading, hoping that one day I would understand it. And 4 rereads later, I can confidently say I understand the Grishaverse. Next, we have The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 1 of Mistborn, and book 1 of me entering, well, book 2 technically, of entering my Brandon Sanderson era. I 5-starred the shit out of this book. The Final Empire was incredible. The entire Mistborn trilogy was phenomenal. There's a bug crawling towards me. I don't like bugs. Get away. Brandon Sanderson is definitely a well-renowned author and well-known author for a reason. His writing style of high fantasy and adult fantasy is very digestible and comprehensible. I never felt like his magic system was too complex for me to understand. In fact, every book I've read by him has had a definite unique magic system. I don't like bugs. It almost gave me Six of Crows vibes in terms of we have this group of people that are trying to accomplish an outlandish goal together, and each of them was recruited for their special skill, led by Kelsier. Now, Kelsier has such a unique character where I hated his guts, but loved him at the same time. Something about him just being so extra and out there annoyed me, but at the same time, I loved his character and how he brought the group together. Rin was also a character I really enjoyed reading about and seeing her development, because she is a very young kid at the start of the series, but as you go through the series, you get to watch her grow up throughout, I think, 5 or 6 years. I might as well just lump in the Will of Ascension and the Hero of Ages into this kind of discussion, because I binge read this series so quickly. It was like one after the other, and then 7 books, and then the other. It was a whole ordeal. However, I have a whole vlog where I talk about the Mistborn trilogy, and I definitely recommend Brandon Sanderson, especially if you've been reading like a lot of YA and you want to get into more of adult fantasy. Brandon Sanderson is a great stepping stone for that, because like I said, his magic systems are never too complicated. There is quite a bit of world building in the second book, and the second book I think is the slowest of the two. I did give the Well of Ascension 4.5 stars because the pacing was a lot more setting up for the third book, but you don't realize it at the time, so it's like a little boring. And characters that I really enjoyed in the first book, particularly Say's point of view, I was a little bored in the second book because he's researching a lot of history about religion and this whole prophecy. But Brandon Sanderson, I love how he just writes the unexpected. I don't think he writes books that you can predict in any form or fashion. Things just constantly kept happening at the end of parts where I was just, my mind was blown. I was like, we're doing this now? And then a part or two passes, I'm like, we're ending part 6 like this? Like, that is what's happening right now? And his writing is just so engaging, albeit a little slow. For some readers, I can understand why it might be like a little boring at some parts. For me, I was hooked and I was invested, and I was so invested that I bought like 11 more Brandon Sanderson books, but that is besides the point. I will be continuing the Mistborn series, so the first part of the trilogy is Era 1, and then there's another trilogy that's Era 2, but still technically part of Mistborn, or at least it's set in the Mistborn universe. And the magic system is so cool. Essentially, there's different metals that you ingest, and they each give you different powers, but most people that have allomancy, which is the ability to actually like control metal, they can only control one. But we get to follow some main characters that are Mistborn, and they get to control all of the metals. It's just such a unique concept with a magic system, and I cannot wait to read more Brandon Sanderson books. So my ratings for Mistborn, because I don't think I actually said them all. The Final Empire, I gave 5 stars. The Well of Ascension, I gave 4.5. And The Hero of Ages, I did give 5 stars. I do own all of these, but they are packed away in storage, so enjoy the graphics on the screen. Next, I have The Icebound Land by John Flanagan. This is the 3rd book in the Ranger's Apprentice series. I am hosting a Ranger's Apprentice readathon with my friend Rosalie, where we are slowly reading through the Ranger's Apprentice series and hosting a live show. I will probably talk about it in every single reading wrap-up because I will have at least one Ranger's Apprentice book I will be wrapping up. This book I remembered being a lot more sad than it was. However, we do have our character struggling with an addiction, and it's a heavy topic for a children's book series. So when I read this as a kid, I understood that Will was going through some shit, but to grasp it now, realizing that the 16-year-old is going through what he's going through, it hurts. It does hurt, and it is crazy to realize that these characters are so young, but I loved Will and Evelyn's relationship and their friendship and them growing through what they're going through together. And then, of course, Horace and Halt's relationship as well. It's a mixture of heavy topics and then lighter banter between Horace and Halt. And like I do in every single video of mine, I definitely recommend picking up Ranger's Apprentice. It is my all-time favorite series of all time. What? It is my favorite series of all time. And why are there a bunch of motorcycles passing right now? What is going on? I live in the middle of nowhere. Why is there motorcycles? Next, I'm going to discuss the cutest series ever, and that is Well Met, and the Renaissance Love Romance series by Jen DeLuca. Oh my gosh. Okay. So the really cool thing about these is they each follow a different character, but they all kind of relate to each other in some way. So in book 1, we have Emily and Simon, and then in book 2, we have Emily's friend Stacy, and we have another character. Okay, I don't know if it's a spoiler if it's on the summary, but there's a plot twist in this with the romance, so I'm not going to really talk about that. And then we have in this book April and Mitch, and April is Emily's sister from the first book. And you know that I'm invested in a series when I remember all the characters' names, because that never happens. That never, ever happens. But oh my goodness, I'm obsessed with this series. So the fun thing about this, though, is they each have different tropes, and it's a fun time. So let me collect myself and discuss Well Met. Emily moves to the small town of Willow Creek because her sister April was recently in a car wreck, and April has a daughter named Caitlin. And so April's kind of on bed rest right now because her leg was shattered essentially. So Emily moves to help kind of take care of Caitlin and take care of April. Now, in the town of Willow Creek, there's this massive Renaissance festival that they do for a fundraiser, and it's gradually grown every year. And the person in charge of it, his name is Simon, and he's a stickler for rules, and he's a little grumpy character. So we kind of have grumpy and sunshine sort of dynamic, and enemies to lovers sort of dynamic. The enemies to lovers, I will say, isn't executed fabulously. They don't really stay enemies for very long, and then they spend a lot of time pining over each other, and you can clearly see, even though it's always a trope where they don't realize that they're both falling for each other, but they secretly hate each other, but not really. That sort of dynamic. Emily ends up volunteering at the Renaissance Festival as a tavern wench. So a lot of this book takes place at the Renaissance Festival, and if you don't know, I'm a fucking nerd, and I love the Renaissance Festival, and I actually have a vlog that'll be released soon where I go to a Renaissance Festival, and then I read this book the day I get back from said Renaissance Festival. So it was very thematic of me, and I literally fell in love with this series. Their romance is so cute. I will say some parts of it are super cheesy. I mean, they literally are quoting Shakespeare while making out, which is a choice. Emily spends some time at a bookstore that is slowly being converted into a coffee shop bookstore. So This book was meant for me, okay? It has references to the Folk Cup and a Renaissance Festival. I'm like screaming. I'm literally so obsessed with this book. I did give this one 4 stars. After Well Met, we have Well Played. Now, when I actually first started Well Played, I didn't realize that all of these follow different characters, but like I said, we're following Stacy. This book is a little interesting because Stacy is just such a fun character because she's very like basic but knows she's basic, and she's just happy about it. She loves her pumpkin spice lattes, she loves her selfies. However, she's been looking for some sort of change, but she ends up texting this guy. And a lot of this book takes place through email conversations. And we don't get a lot of the Ren Fair. We do get a sliver in the beginning and a sliver in the end. But regardless, this romance was so cute. It was very different from our enemies to lovers moment. And like I said, a lot of it took place over the course of a year through emails. And it was just so sweet. And I just found myself smiling and having such a fun time reading this. I definitely enjoyed it. And I think Jen DeLuca's writing got even like a little better after Well Met. And I'm just such a sucker for this series. And I continue saying that when I picked up Well Matched, which I gave 5 stars, and I cried at the end of this book. So this has fake dating, and if you don't know me, hello, I love fake dating tropes. This has fake dating, it has one bed. Are you kidding me? Like, what more can you ask for? Especially fake dating at a family reunion. The Spanish love deception who, okay? So, we have April, who is very closed off, very reserved. She's been living in the small town where everyone knows everyone's business, and she kind of hates that part of the small town vibe because she's a very private person and she doesn't really like going out. She never really volunteered at this Renaissance Festival. It's been going on and it's a huge part of the town's thing in the summer, and she just doesn't really know what goes on about it, even though her daughter is obsessed with volunteering at it. We have very quiet, very reserved April, and then we have Mitch, who is a character we get to see throughout the other 2 books, and he is very boisterous, very loud, very fun. And I wanted to see more of Mitch than just like kind of the comedic relief type of character, and we got that. We got that so hard in this book. We got April coming out of her shell, and I fell in love. I will say it's very, very interesting reading these books because the characters are 25 to 30 plus, and I'm 21, and I was relating to all of these characters in different ways, and it's just so interesting to see how you can relate to characters that are like so much older than you compared to the characters that are like closer in age. Like we see Caitlin, who is in high school, and I really could relate to her character, and it's just crazy how much your life changes after you get out of school. This book, not even lying, they were doing like house renovations, and it was a whole plot moment where Mitch and April are repainting walls and redoing cabinets, and I literally was like, damn, this makes me want to like settle down with someone and like renovate a house and like just like be able to wake up and like have someone make me coffee. I don't even drink coffee, but oh my gosh, Jen DeLuca's books are so good for escapism. It was so easy to just slip into the universe and enjoy the time with these characters. I was simply obsessed, needless to say. Definitely recommend, like I said, 2 4 stars and a 5 star, and I'm reading Well Traveled. It's literally coming in the mail today, and I already know I'm gonna sit and read it in one go, but I'll do that in my next wrap up since today's the last day of April. Anyways, moving on. Next, we have a series of books. They're Ruby, we have After the Fall, Before the Dawn, and Roman Holiday. Now, Ruby is an anime, and there's like 9 seasons out or something. It was originally posted on YouTube, and I was very, very invested in this Ruby series, and I started rewatching the series with my friend Lexi, and I decided to pick up the books because my sister actually had read them, said they were not too bad, and I was like, heck, why not? I will say, okay, this book and this book, was it this book? I don't even remember because I read these like all back to back to back basically. I just thought the first 2 were very, very boring. I'm pretty sure Before the Dawn mostly takes place in the middle of a desert, and I am not someone who really likes books that take place in the desert, it turns out. There's a book in Ranger's Apprentice that does, and that is like the only exception because I've read a few other books where they're in the desert and I'm like, this is boring. Give me some better scenery. I think I gave this 2.5, I gave this 3, and I gave this 3.5. We get Team Coffee and we get Team Sun. I don't really feel like going in depth trying to explain Ruby because I feel like trying to explain these books is like trying to explain the whole of like the anime and everything that happens. But I do definitely recommend the anime. It's really fun. Their main thing is they all have like different like semblances, which is like a superpower kind of. And then all of their weapons are convertible. So there's a scythe that folds into a gun. There's like gauntlets that can shoot like it's a whole ordeal, and it's super snazzy. The writing I was not impressed with at all. I think E.C. Myers has a lot of improving to do, and I think he got there in book 3, but even so, it was just still way too cheesy and boring. This one we follow a villain named Torchwick and a villain named Neo. Mostly following Neo, which is really, really cool because in the show, we don't get to see her a lot, and it's also fascinating to me because she doesn't speak any lines, and we get to kind of see her convert into a villain and join up with Roman Holiday. So it was a fun time. I don't regret reading them. I read all of these in 2 days, so it was part of like my big binge read in the middle of the month. I don't know, if you're really into Ruby, I would recommend them, but just on a whim by themselves, I don't really recommend them. Next, I picked up Spy Family Volume 9. Katie had borrowed this on Libby, and we share a Libby account, so I was like, don't mind if I do. And so I ended up sitting down and reading it. I did give it 5 stars. I typically give a lot of books in Spy Family 5 stars. They were still on the cruise ship, which is kind of funny because Katie's been complaining about them being on the cruise ship, but I really enjoyed that sequence, and I even enjoyed the sequence after. We got Becky on the cover. We have Becky in love with Lloyd. I am all for this. Becky is like one of my favorite characters, and her cover on book 9 is so cute, and I can't wait for these to kind of continue being released and translated. It's just been a fun time. Granted, the plot really isn't moving anywhere in terms of like the goal that Lloyd has with infiltrating the school and Anya has with like getting Stella stars, but it's been fun, and I really love the characters, so I'm content with reading a book where you're just vibing with the characters on their little adventures. I'll keep up with it, I'll continue it, but yeah, 5 stars, not really much to say. It was fun. Then on the same vein of manga, I read Orange, the Complete Collection Volume 2. This contains volumes 4 through 6 of Orange, and Orange is my favorite manga of all time. It was also the first manga I ever read. It does deal with some very serious and deep topics, so please do check the trigger warnings. However, I definitely recommend this series if you can handle it. It is such a beautiful story about friendship, and basically the premise is these characters receive letters from themselves in the future, basically telling them all the regrets that they've had and different things that they need to do to save one of their friends from a tragic fate. It's just a story about friendship, and I cry every single time, and I have a vlog where I read this and I cry. And then there's Orange Future. Both of these I gave 5 stars, by the way. Orange Future, we get to follow a character named Suwa, who was kind of a love interest in the first book, and we get to follow his perspective and see how much he sacrificed and how much he gave up for other people's happiness. And it also really hurts. One of you beautiful people who I owe my life to told me about Orange Volume 7, to you, dear one, in Kakeru's perspective. It's finally translated to English, and I have never, ever purchased a book so fast. I read that comment, went to Amazon, bought the book, and then went back and responded to said comment. I'm so excited to read that. Thank you so much for watching this massive, massive wrap-up. I seriously recommend putting off all your responsibilities and just reading. It definitely is not something, well, like, I recommend it, but, like, should you? No. Did I? Yes. So, I read 16 books this month, and I'm really, really happy with the variety of reading I did. I mean, I read 3 600-page books by Brandon Sanderson. I found a new favorite series by Jen DeLuca. I'm literally obsessed. I've been thinking about these books nonstop. I'm so invested in these characters. Like, for me to remember all these characters' names so off the top of my head is so unlike me. So you know I'm obsessed. Thank you so much to my lovely Patreons over on KSXCast. That is our book club over on Patreon, where we have a monthly book discussion, exclusive Discord server, and some behind-the-scenes content. And thank you to all of you for sticking around and watching this wrap-up. I hope you got some good recommendations, or just are informed and in the know about what I've been reading as of late. I hope y'all have a lovely rest of your day or night, and I hope to see you in the next one. Toodles!